Let's take a moment to look at progress through another lens. Can you remember an industry that was once extremely personal and curated and now takes place almost exclusively online? I'm talking about travel. Say it's 1992 and you wanted to book a vacation. You went to a travel agency. For anyone born in 1992, think of a travel agency as a travel website that you can stand in with real people who you can actually speak to, who then used landline telephones to actually speak to other people, to book you flights and hotels. It was pretty nice, actually. I didn't have to do a thing. Today, we can't imagine booking travel any other way than online. But the pendulum started to swing back, pre-COVID, that is, and specialty travel companies that could curate a trip were growing rapidly. There are many parallels between travel and design. To help us dig into a few of them is a true veteran of both industries, Gregg Brockway. Gregg co-founded Hotwire and TripIt, two highly disruptive digital platforms in the travel space, before co-founding Chairish, the home furnishings marketplace. With a father who was an antiques dealer for 35 years, Gregg has seen firsthand how much the design industry has changed and how quickly things today can become antiques. Join me in welcoming Gregg Brockway, who's beaming in from our studio in San Francisco.
Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk a little bit about my travel experience. You know, the travel industry broke some new ground when it started to migrate online over 25 years ago, and I was a part of it. Those experiences have helped shape how we started Chairish 7 years ago and navigate the twists and turns ever since. Today, what I'd like to talk about is the design industry and some of the changes that are affecting us, and I'll relate some of those back to my travel experience. And my hope is that some of this will be helpful for other leaders out in the design community as they're thinking about their own right path forward. So let's talk about what just happened. 2020 started off as a fine year. The design industry was growing 3 to 5% a year. It had been doing that for some years, and it was expected to continue for the foreseeable future. The online portion of the design community was increasing slowly. It was going up about 1% a year over the last 5 or 6 years. So at the end of 2019, what you can see from the graphs on the right is that the online portion of the home goods industry was 14%, which was still a very modest number relative to other industries. And then COVID arrived. And boy, it really did rewrite the future. What happened is in Q2 alone, it wiped out 5 years of economic growth, 30 million people unemployed. There was a wave of retail and other related bankruptcies and a massive consumer move online. A lot changed in a very short period of time. Now, when I talk to other people in the design community, I do hear some regrets and desires to go back to the way things were. And unfortunately, life doesn't often work just like in the movie. So while it's normal that Dorothy wanted to go back to Kansas, totally understandable, when a new digital baseline is set and it's changed so dramatically, it's very rare, or at least the experience of other industries, is that it's very rare for it ever to go all the way back. And so the question is, if we can't go back, where do we do going forward? And I think that's what I'd like to spend some time talking about. So let's look at what has changed in the design community recently and go from there. One of the first things that's changed is we're spending a lot more time at home. It's gone up from 6 hours on average up to 16 hours on average. Home used to be where we would eat, sleep, and play. And now it's all of that plus a whole lot more. It's where we work. It's where we go to school. It's what we use for the gym. And for many people, it's much more. And so again, it's become more important for virtually everybody. We have been through a real shock to the system in terms of the economy, and it has dropped significantly. But disposable income has not gone away completely. It still exists, but where it's being spent has shifted. And there's a whole lot of things that it's not being spent on anymore. It's not being spent on travel. It's not being spent on nightlife, dining out, live events, et cetera, et cetera. It's not being spent on beauty and fashion. It's not being spent on housekeeping. The home industry, because it's so important, is getting a lot more of the disposable income. So the home goods industry is getting a bigger slice of a smaller pie. Another thing helping the home goods industry is that people are moving. Economy's down, but that doesn't mean they're not moving. In fact, they're moving in ever greater numbers. Sometimes it's the reprise of the Brooklyn effect, where they're going from high-density, high-expensive urban areas to adjacent, lower-cost, more spacious ones. And sometimes it's much bigger moves where they're going across country. Resort properties around the country are doing much better than they expected in terms of sales volumes today than they expected to do coming into the year. That's also been really good for the home goods industry. One other thing that I wanted to comment on, which isn't specific to the home industry, but is true more generally, is that brand loyalty has taken a hit. You know, whether it's for price or convenience or better service or what have you, people are shopping around in ever greater numbers and have become much more brand promiscuous. And what that means is that the astute brands are spending as much of their energy retaining existing customers as they are trying to reach out to new customers. And so when you roll all these things together, there's been a massive increase in importance of the home, more willingness to shop around, and because retail has largely been shut down, the online portion of the home goods industry has been accelerated dramatically. When you look at this graph, it really brings it to life. You can see from the top line, the online portion of the home goods industry skyrocketed starting in April and has continued on. And unfortunately, because retail shut down so abruptly, the in-store portion of the home goods industry dropped dramatically. But the reason I think this is an interesting graph to look at is the middle line. Because the home is so much more important to so many people, the overall home goods industry is actually up year over year more than it was before COVID, and that is a positive for us. The home industry is doing better than, it's hard, but it's doing better than most. And so we're fortunate in that regard. So the important question at this point is, where does the design industry go from here? A lot has changed. It feels a little bit uncomfortable, and we know we can't go back. And so the answer is we have to evolve and figure out the right path forward. Quick example of how online came to be a big part of the travel industry. So it started back in 1994 with the launch of a property called TravelWeb that most of you probably don't remember. The next year, the first online ticket was sold, 95, 96. Expedia launched. So when you get to 2000, what you had was a surprising number of very large, very rapidly growing online travel agencies. And it set off a flurry of activity in the travel industry as everybody else started thinking and appreciating the potential here and trying to figure out, how do I become part of that? And it set off a really interesting set of conversations because the question became, should I be investing in my own branded destination, my brand.com destination, or should I be going after and trying to maintain and grow my presence through marketplaces? And this was a ferocious battle that honestly lasted for years. And with time and with data, the answer became clear, and the most successful brands realized that they needed to do both. They needed to have a branded destination as well as a marketplace, and that's how they've largely moved forward. One of my jobs as a co-founder of Hotwire, was to run the team of folks who was out trying to talk to the industry about joining the platform and being part of it. And having those conversations again and again and again, we came to call it the Billboard Effect, because what we were able to show over time with data was that, yes, there was value coming from sales through the platform, but even not selling, brands came to appreciate that being seen by so many people so regularly was a positive in terms of brand visibility, and it worked very much like the offline billboard does. If you can get in front of the right audience, it helps you underscore and reinforce the brand presence and brand awareness. Four Seasons was a great example of a brand that went through an evolution. So it was one of the most vocal opponents to being part of marketplaces, and over time, seeing the success of others in marketplaces and seeing the data. Now when you go online, you'll find Four Seasons in most of the in a large number of places besides fourseasons.com. It was a slow process, but I think their experience shows a successful path forward. The question then became then, and I think it's relevant today too, which marketplace is the right marketplace to participate in? And here is a series of questions to ask and get answers to. Is my brand visible? Am I being seen in a way that makes sense by the right people? Is the audience the right audience? Demographics and psychographics really matter. Am I making any money? Is it generating any revenue for me? And what's my cost? How operationally complicated is it to be a part of this marketplace? And do they honor the things that are important to me? Do they honor MAP? Do they honor channel conflict and pricing to the right customers? And a whole lot of other things are relevant and important to ask. And then the last thing is, am I getting any data back from this? Am I getting any? A marketplace is a 24/7 real-time focus group. And being able to share the data back with participants in the right fashion is good for the marketplace, and it's good for the brands, and it's a very positive thing. So a lot of important questions to ask and answer when you're deciding which is the right place to go. So this is not a lot of time to present so much material, but I have to talk just for very briefly about another really important part of the design community, which is the trade. And the question is online migration, online acceleration good for the trade or not? And here I think looking at what has happened in the travel industry may be a useful example. Because again, when I talk to the designers these days, I have flashbacks of some of the conversations I'd have with travel agents back in the day. It's not the same job, but the similarities are very strong. So let me give you a quick background on what happened with travel agents with the coming of the online business. And the first thing that happened as the travel industry started to migrate online was that there was a wave of do-it-yourselfers jumping into this, which made travel agents quite nervous. But what happened over time is the do-it-yourselfers came to appreciate that when changes happen, intentional or unintentional, solving them became harder. The cascade effect that was kicked off and the number of changes that had to be made when dealing with travel restrictions, et cetera, became very difficult, became overwhelming, as did all the information. And so the expertise that travel agents brought, especially for more complicated trips, became valued more than ever. And for agents, there were some positives as well, because the internet solved a lot of the vexing problems that had existed beforehand that required manual work and phone calls and, oh my gosh, anybody remember faxes? It was a big part of life. So what happened with travel agents was the initial reaction was the sky is falling. But the agents' jobs didn't go away, and in some ways they got better because they could spend more of their time on creating fabulous destination experiences to fun places around the world, or helping with really intense business travel needs and things of that nature, and a lot less time on the manual stuff. And so I'm an optimist. When I think about what is possible and what's likely to happen for designers, I think a lot of good things can come of this as well. And with the tools, as the tools become more widespread and more widely adopted, it's going to become easier. And then the automation of logistics and in-office workflow and a whole lot of things like that will become easier and more manageable. And then there's some other benefits. E-design is already starting to take hold. Renderings were a big part of every project, or many projects, and they'll become more common and easier to generate. And then actually advising and doing contact-free services from the start is possible. And one of the other advantages of online is you'll be able to source new projects entirely. So again, I think it's important to remember computers can do a lot, but they're not made for nor capable of providing style and taste or the expertise of a good designer. And so I think the jobs will get better over time. So this does feel a little bit uncomfortable, and a lot has changed, and the future is being rewritten, but I am an optimist. I do believe we're headed towards a better place, and there's a couple things I'd ask you to remember. First, as technology becomes more widely available, embraced and used properly, it actually is a powerful way to tie the community and make the community connection stronger. The second thing is, as strategies are debated and mapped out, I do believe that the successful path forward in the design world is the same as it has been in other industries, which is having a branded presence as well as participation in the right marketplaces is the best path forward. And finally, again, it feels uncomfortable and it feels hard, but the future is bright and things will get better. And I think with time and some effort from all of us, we'll be able to make the design community a better and more productive and more comfortable place for everybody. Thank you.